Hi, friends. So we're back, and I was just able to do a lesson with you on plot elements. And we talked about the exposition, the rising action, the climax, and the falling action, as well as the resolution or the end of the story. So, what we're going to focus on today is also talking about plot elements, but we're going to really focus only on one really important part of a story, and that is the conflict in the story. So that's what this lesson is about. I'm Mrs. Gore, and this is sixth grade ELA, and this is the Sun Devil Learning Lab. So we talked a lot in my last lesson about storylines or plots. And so we talked about Harry Potter, which is one of my favorites, and the different ways plot elements are used. So now we're going to talk about how those conflicts play into a story. So go right into it. We'll talk about what is a conflict. So a conflict is a struggle between two opposing forces in a story, and conflict is necessary to propel any story forward. Okay? So if you don't have that conflict, that story doesn't go anywhere. So whatever the conflict is, it has to be somewhere. Okay? So for this lesson, we are going to need a couple more things than usual. You can pause this video right now after we talk about our materials. Just pause it. We'll take a break for 1 second. Sorry, not 1 second, but we'll take a break. And take as long as you need. Grab a blank sheet of unlined paper. So if you have a piece of paper that's like a white piece of computer paper, construction paper, and if you have only lined paper, that'll work too. And then grab some lined paper or a notebook or something, journal, and then a pen or a pencil. And then if you would, grab a ruler this time. And this is just going to make it a little more easy to make what we're going to make. It's going to be kind of a diagram that we'll make. So go ahead and pause the video and take as long as you need to round up these 4 materials here. So, and then as soon as you get back, we will go ahead and begin. Okay, so I hope you grabbed your materials. And if you don't have the materials, it's okay. You can follow along and see what we're going to be doing. It's just more hands-on if we have the materials to um, make the chart that we're going to make later. So, okay, so our objective today is this, and you can read along with me. I think it helps it process in your brain if you read along at the same time that I'm reading our objectives. So I can analyze and identify different types of conflict in a story. Okay, so we analyzed our plot elements in another lesson. This one, we're just going to analyze and identify the different types of conflict because all conflict is not the same. And we're going to see why. Okay? And our purpose today is this. A lot of times we're the ones reading or say watching a story unfold. And so, but what if we're the writer? What if we are the one writing the story? Um, we need to be able to understand conflict so that we can write a well-developed plot. So, since conflict is what drives your story, you have to understand how to create the conflict if you are the writer. So, that is our purpose. And we'll go over a couple vocabulary words just so we remember what they mean. So opposing means against. So it means it's fighting against each other. And I think we talked about this in the last video too. Opposing means against. When we talk about nature, we're talking about the physical world as a whole. We're talking about plants, animals, weather, bodies of water, space, all things nature, and society. So the word society has to do with people living together in a community. So, and we're going to use these words, these vocabulary words are going to be in this lesson several times over. So if you want to take any notes on these, go ahead and pause the video and write down your notes. and then just start when you're ready. Okay. Now we have to talk about something um, that we need to understand before we really are going to understand all conflict. So we have to know the difference between internal and external conflict. So the internal means inside, right? So that means the struggle within a character's mind. So that's all happening within your character. That has nothing to do with an outside force. It's internal. And then external, of course, is the opposite of that, which is everything on the outside. So the struggle between the character and an outside force. And we're going to talk about what those forces can be, because they can be many, many different things. So we are going to discuss all of this. Just remember internal and external conflict. Okay, so this is where you are going to, again, pause the video if you would like. This is a little activity I want you to do. And that is to think of a conflict you have experienced and whether it was an internal or external conflict. So that's just going to get that idea in our mind. So internal or external conflict. And then write briefly about it on your paper. So like I said, go ahead, pause the video, take a few minutes. Just think of some conflict you have experienced, something you think is a struggle, whether it's internal or external. And whenever you're ready, we'll go on. Oh, I forgot. Okay, so my little star here. This is where I'm going to share with you my examples. Okay, so I have an internal and an external conflict here, and I experience these struggles, I would say, almost on a daily basis. So these are my examples, real life examples. So I want a little wiener dog puppy. Okay, I used to have one, and but I have 3 dogs already. Okay, so you can see where that's like an internal conflict that I deal with all the time. So I have 4 kids as well. So I have 4 kids, and we have 3 pretty big dogs. So that's kind of one of those, I wrestle with it, I struggle with it. There's really not a lot I can do about it right now, but it's still a struggle because I would love to go out and get myself a little wiener dog puppy and make myself happy. But I have to think about my kids. I have to think about the other dogs, the other pets that we have. We also have 2 cats and a lot of chickens to take care of. So do I really, really need to go out there and get that little puppy just because I want it? I really can't right now. So that's a really internal struggle. Okay. And then part of that is the external struggle that I have with my husband, because let's just read it. Okay. My husband and I have a lot of conflict over getting a puppy. Since he has brought most of the dogs home, it makes it harder for me to get the puppy that I want. So he has 2 out of the 3 dogs that we have, he has went out and either got from somebody. One of them he bought and he drove all the way to Prescott to pick it up. And so these are our dogs. They're our pets. We love them. But because he wanted a certain type of dog or wanted another dog, now it's put us in this place where there's a struggle because I love our dogs. Sometimes I wish we didn't have 3. We don't really have enough time for them, and I wish that I could get that little wiener dog puppy. So I hope this kind of helped you. So it's like me and my husband against each other in this situation. So I have the internal within myself and then the external. I hope those were good examples to kind of show you what I mean by internal and external. Okay, so this is where we jump in and we talk about the 4 types of conflict. So every character in every story ever is either dealing with something within their own self or they're struggling against someone or something else. So what I want you to do here is we're going to spend a few minutes like on this particular slide. So while it's up, it's going to be up for quite some time. I'm going to move myself out of the way here. And you can take your white piece of paper. I should have gotten one in front of me. But take your white piece of paper, and I want you to put it, I never remember, it's hamburger style, right? If it's landscape style, like where it's wider this way than it is tall. So take your white piece of paper, put it this way. And I had you get out a ruler just to make your lines straight. And I want you to copy this chart. Copy. And like I said, it can take as long as you need because you can always pause the video and then pick up, you know, in a few minutes when you're done with copying the chart. So you're going to want 4 lines down, 4 columns down, 4 columns across, and then your little titles up at the top, up here where it says these titles up at the top. So just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and say pause it now. If you want to just make your chart, leave it blank, or you can start copying down the notes. We'll give it a couple of minutes and then we'll start back up. So go ahead and pause if you would like. Okay, so I hope you had time to go ahead and just make the blank chart, and we're going to go over it now and we're going to fill it in. So just like I have it on here, 4 types of conflict. So we're just going to start going through it. So person versus person, that's pretty self-explanatory, okay? So you could think of like Captain America and Iron Man, you know, that's a kind of a classic person to person. They just have this theme that they just can't, like, they can't get over, you know, they just don't really hit it off like they should, right? Anybody who's watched the Avengers, love their movies. Person versus person, okay? Definition would be it's an external conflict because it's not taking place inside the person. In a way it is because it's their feelings are involved, but it's definitely that person versus another person. So it's external conflict that involves a mental or physical struggle between 2 characters in a story. Okay, and you can write those notes down. Just feel free to fill in your chart as we go. Pause if you need to finish writing. Example of person to person would be like 2 siblings disagreeing over cleaning their room. Person to person, right? And then on your bottom of your chart, I would like under illustration, you can write whatever makes you think of person to person. If you want to draw Iron Man and Captain America, boom, there you go. Put it in that space. I just filled it in with a little picture of what looks like 2 siblings, and they don't look really super happy right now. So that way you have that mental image that jogs your memory. So now what we can do is, sorry about that. We can go to the next one. So we think we feel pretty good about person to person, one character against another character. So person versus self. This is our one and only example of internal conflict because it is the person versus themselves. And it says it's an internal conflict that involves a struggle between the character and him or her conscious or their self. Okay, so yeah, they're conflicted about something. So you find out in the story what that is, right? So an example I have here, down here where my arrow is a boy is torn between standing up to his friend's bully or keeping quiet, right? And that's a struggle that I hope none of you have ever experienced or been on any side of, but that would be an internal struggle. Like, do I help this person or do I just stand by and hope that it resolves itself? Which we know we should definitely let somebody know if behavior like that's going on. But that would be an internal struggle. So I have this little character down here who looks very concerned and very worried and upset, right? Person versus self. Okay? Person versus nature. Okay, that one's pretty, I bet we get a lot of mental images. I think of a lot of different movies I've seen that are a person versus something in nature. So it says it's an external conflict that involves a struggle between the elements of nature that are out of the character's control. Okay, an example is fishermen are caught in a storm at sea. Okay, that would be person versus nature. And there's my picture of a ship at sea, a fishing boat at sea. So again, you just fill in your illustrations however you like to think of the type of conflict, okay? And you can always come back to it later, or like I said, feel free to pause this video for 10 minutes if you need to and fill in your chart, or just keep going along with us. Now, the last one we have is person versus society. That's why we talked about that word society, meaning, the community of people. So this is also an external conflict that involves the struggle between the character and the rules or laws that govern society. Okay? And I have my example is a man is accused of a crime he didn't do. So we've seen a lot of movies like that. And that's a good example of person versus society. Okay. So I hope you see the pattern here where most of these conflicts are external, meaning an outside force. One of them is internal, and that is person versus self. Okay? So, like I said, take as much time as you need to finish your chart. This was kind of our visual activity for the day, and make it however you would like. Keep it in your notes. You may need it next year for something you do in class. So anyways, it's a good little resource. So we're gonna go ahead and move on at this point and kind of jump into our types of conflict. Why this isn't changing, I don't know. Let me see. Let's go to 11. Okay. Whoopsie doopsie. Stop that. Okay. So, my first example of a conflict. This is one that came to my mind, and I want you to, I'm not going to tell you the answers until I give you some time to think about it. So, what kind of conflict is this? Anybody who's read Moby Dick or heard the story or even just knows what it's about, when Ishmael is trapped inside of Moby Dick, what kind of conflict do you think that is? I think what we can do right here is I'm going to come back to these after we basically take a little quiz. So I want you to write down on your paper what type of conflict you think this is, okay? We can kind of number it number 1, okay? So think about it, write your answer, and we're just going to test our knowledge here in a little while, okay? How about this example? This would be example number 2. Hiccups again. Toy Story, the movie Toy Story, Woody wants to be Andy's only favorite toy and doesn't want to share his kid with Buzz. So who do we think that? What kind of conflict is that going to be? I'm writing my answers down too so we can check them when we're done. Okay? Okay. So what about this one? Charlie Bucket struggles with poverty as he wishes to buy a chocolate bar and find a golden ticket. So Charlie Bucket, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He's struggling with poverty. He really wants that chocolate bar. He doesn't have any money, but he wants to be like all the other kids. So what kind of a struggle do you think that might be? Okay. Now, what about this one? I had to include this. So Harry Potter of Gryffindor House faces Slytherin House in the Quidditch match for the house championship. So it's house versus house in a match, a Quidditch match, and they're in the struggle for basically the award, right? The trophy, the house championship. So what type of a conflict would this be? Okay, move on to the next one. What type of conflict would this be? So Captain Jack Sparrow of Pirates of the Caribbean is on the run from the British Army. What do we picture when we picture that? Okay, so we talked about what type of conflict. Jack Sparrow is on the run from the British Army. Okay, so write down your answer for that one. What about this one? The mighty ocean is swallowing the ship named the Titanic after its run-in with a treacherous iceberg. Okay, there's a lot going on with that. There's a lot of conflict with that story. Just think of those mighty forces, those mighty opposing forces to the Titanic. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're going to go back and we're going to talk about each one of these. Okay, whoops. All right. So what kind of conflict is Ishmael being trapped inside of Moby Dick? So Moby Dick is an animal, which is part of nature. So we would pretty much say this conflict is a person versus nature, right? Because he is trapped inside that whale. He cannot come out. And in Moby Dick, there's a lot of different conflicts, but particularly when he's trapped inside the whale, we're just thinking of at that moment, that's a big part of Moby Dick is him being trapped inside of the whale. The whale is Moby Dick. So we can say it's person versus nature on that one. Okay. Now, what about in Toy Story? Okay. We think of Woody and Buzz like they go hand in hand, right? They're best buds. But did they start out that way? Think of the beginning of Toy Story. Think of when Buzz shows up, right? Anybody who's seen the movie, I hope you've all seen it because it's an awesome one. When Buzz shows up on the scene, is Woody especially like excited to see him? And it kind of tells us right here, you know, that Woody wants to be Andy's only favorite toy, but he doesn't want to share his kid with Buzz. Okay, so I think this is kind of like plot elements. It's kind of like resolutions, how there can be many examples of or many ways to end a story, many types of resolutions. There can be different conflicts in a movie or a piece of literature, right? So in this particular one, I think we have two conflicts going on. Okay, so we have to start, just to look at the first one, we do have an internal conflict. Woody has an internal conflict. And what is that? He is struggling because he does not like to share, does he? He wants to be the only toy in Andy's life. If he could have it his way, there would be no other toys except for him, you know? So he's having this internal conflict of like, this is my kid and I don't want to share him, right? Well, then Buzz shows up on the scene, and he's Andy's brand new toy that he gets for his birthday, and he's all shiny and new, and everybody thinks he's so cool, and he can make sounds, and he has a laser, and so then it starts this conflict of Woody against Buzz. Woody really doesn't want to like him. He doesn't want to help him. He doesn't want to be his friend. He almost kind of wants, he almost tries to lose him a couple times. But then he's got this internal struggle because his kid, Andy, would be devastated if that was to happen. So what happens? Woody decides, yeah, I really can't let something happen to this guy because in turn, it would hurt my kid. And I can't let that happen, right? So because he loves Andy so much, he kind of babysits Buzz through the whole movie, kind of, gets him back home. I'm talking more on the lines of the first movie. So yes, I would say we have a person to self with Woody, and we have a person to person between Buzz and Woody. Okay? Hope that makes sense to you. And I do think there's multiple conflicts in some movies. Some movies or books, it's pretty obvious what the one conflict is. Usually there's little side conflicts going on. Okay? So that helps us understand that one. And we've got Charlie Bucket. Okay? Kind of feel like the same with Charlie Bucket. So if we think about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I'm talking the old school original one because I honestly have not sat through the newest one. So this one I'm picturing, we have Charlie Bucket, and he's lives in that rundown house with his mom and his 4 grandparents, and they just don't have any money. They're eating cabbage soup like every night for dinner. And then there's this contest with the golden ticket. And what kid in the world did not want to find this golden ticket? They're all searching for this golden ticket, right? Charlie has no money, no hopes of really getting any money, and yet he wants a golden ticket. He just wants a candy bar. So I would say with Charlie Bucket, we have a little bit of the same thing going on as Woody and Buzz. He has an internal struggle with being poor, right? He doesn't have any money and he's struggling because he wants to help his mom, uh, you know, and he doesn't want to spend any money that they might have or might end up with on something so frivolous and silly as a candy bar. So he's struggling with that. He's struggling every time he sees another child buy another candy bar and he sees another kid get a golden ticket, right? He's just struggling on the inside. I just wish it was me. I mean, how am I ever going to get there, right? And then he does sort of have a struggle with uh, other kids, and the other people. Like I said, every time he watches another kid get a golden ticket, he's devastated because he wants one too. And so he's at conflict or with every other kid in the world over these golden tickets, and there's only 5 of them, and he knows that. So we have that internal struggle and that external struggle, person versus self and person versus person. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now let's go to the next one. Okay, so the type of conflict for this slide, I had one particular type of conflict in mind. So Harry Potter of Gryffindor House faces Slytherin House in the Quidditch match for House Championship. So Gryffindor and Slytherin are 2 different houses at Hogwarts in the Harry Potter books. They're sort of opposing, right? Opposing forces, because one is good and one is more of the dark, it's they're not as good. It's kind of like good and evil. But they have to play against each other in this Quidditch match. So in this particular type of conflict, I was thinking very obviously person versus person. Because we have Harry Potter, and then we have the people from Slytherin house that he is opposing, right, in the game. He wants to beat them in the game. Person versus person, or wizard versus wizard, if you will. So that is that one. And we have Captain Jack Sparrow, okay? Pirates of the Caribbean. What type of conflict would this be? So Captain Jack Sparrow is on the run from the British Army, okay? He's on the run a lot. He's a pirate. He's not a desirable or likable character. Well, I mean, we like him, but in the world that they live in, he's an outlaw, right? He's broken the law. He's stolen things. He's just not a good guy. So the British Army is usually in some kind of pursuit of him. They don't like him. So this type of conflict would be a good example of person versus society. Okay, because if the British Army catches up to Jack Sparrow, guess where he's going to go? Where is he going to be? They're going to throw him in jail. They're going to lock him up because he's a criminal in their minds, right? So I believe, again, Pirates of the Caribbean has a lot of different conflicts going on, but in this particular one, Jack Sparrow versus the British Army, it's person versus society, okay? Because society is like the law, the rules, and he's breaking those, right? Okay. So good examples of all of those different types. We had a couple different ones that fell into a couple different categories, and that's okay too. So, oh, and we have this last one we forgot to go over, I'm sorry. So this one is the mighty ocean swallowing the ship named the Titanic after it's run-in with a treacherous iceberg. So the ship's going along. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie or read any books about the Titanic, but the ship is going along and it hits an iceberg. Crunch, and it just puts a hole right into that ship. So then the story becomes, of course, this is based on a true story, this fight for life, all the people on the ship. But what is their conflict? I mean, what is the conflict? Conflict is they're on a sinking ship, right? This ship is going down into the depths of the ocean, and it's gradually raising up out of the air, and then it's just going to go and it's going to sink. So these people are fighting, and this ship, if you will, is fighting nature. It's fighting this huge ocean and this iceberg that punctured, put a big hole in the ship. So the struggle there is like ship with its people on board versus the ocean, versus the iceberg in the ocean, right? So good example of person versus nature. If those natural elements, those nature elements weren't there, like the iceberg wasn't there, we would have no story of the Titanic in our history. That ship would have just sailed right on through, right? Because the iceberg damaged the ship, now you have the ocean, this massive ocean, scary ocean playing into that as well. So everybody's battling this water that's taking, the ship is taking on water. So person versus nature. Okay. Okay, so this is where we're going to go ahead and wrap up our talk about conflicts. And we may just revisit that little chart we made. But our wrap up consists of this. Let's restate our objective. This is what we can do during the lesson. Okay, so I can analyze and identify different types of conflict in a story. So I hope if you're watching this video, you could probably go ahead and like pause the video right here, and without looking at your chart, see if you can remember the 4 types of conflict. Okay, you can test yourself by writing them down and then pausing the video, writing them down, and then going back to that chart that you made and checking your knowledge. And then, of course, you can come up with your own examples, uh, kind of like the ones I came up with in this video. So go back to, we have that person to person, person versus self. We have person versus nature, person versus society. So those are the main types of conflict that you're going to see in stories. And I bet you, if you've ever written a story for a class or maybe just for fun, you would find one of those types of conflict. So that's another activity that you can do, is take out your journal, take out your piece of paper, and just start writing. Just write a story. Pick a character, pick a setting, remember back to our lesson about plot elements, and just pick, some of those, make sure you have the 5 elements, but pick a setting, pick a mood, pick some details, start writing, and I bet before too long, your conflict will arise. And it's in that moment you will figure out if it is person to person, person to self, person to nature, or person to society, based on what your story is all about. So that's kind of a fun little example and a fun little lesson. And I kind of, because I have Harry Potter in front of me from our last lesson, I also want to talk about a couple different other conflicts that are in this story, that if any of you are familiar with Harry Potter, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the story of Harry Potter starts out with a huge conflict, a huge person to person conflict. And that is where Harry, the story starts out where he lives with his aunt and his uncle and his spoiled, rotten cousin named Dudley. And they don't know that he's a wizard. Or, I'm sorry, they have a hunch because his parents were. But they treat him differently. They treat him really poorly. They lock him under the stairs. And then when Hogwarts is trying to send his letter to him to tell him that he's been accepted, he gets to go to the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, they won't give him his mail. They won't let him read the letter. So he's in conflict with his aunt and his uncle and his cousin, person to person. They're really awful people. So right away, you have a conflict in the story, right? Now, if I mention some of the names in the story, we also will know a couple other. So what about if I say the word Draco Malfoy? Anybody who's read Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy is part of Slytherin House. Slytherin House is the opposing house of Gryffindor, that's where Harry Potter goes. So you can see, like, there's multiple conflicts. Those boys just don't hit it off. They do not care for each other. And from right off the bat, Draco is like a bully to Harry Potter. Okay? Another person to person. And one more thought. I keep having coughing fits. If you think about Harry himself, he has this amazing power. He's a wizard, but he's at constant conflict with how to use it, being told that he's not allowed to use it, being in situations where he wants to use his magic or he needs to use his magic, and always having in the back of his mind that he probably shouldn't use it. Could you imagine that kind of conflict within yourself? So Harry Potter has a huge amount of person to self conflict as well. So those are, I feel like it's just a great example of not only we used Harry Potter for our plot elements, but we also used it for conflict. So we remember now what conflict means. We remember the 4 types of conflict, and then the 2, basically their types of conflict as well, which is the internal and the external. Okay. So at any moment that you want to rewind back in this video and make that chart, if you didn't get to earlier, if you just joined us later in the video, just go ahead and pause the video on that white 4-column chart that I had everybody make, and just feel free to make it. Another way you could do it is fold your paper into, like to where it makes 4 columns, and then you can just fill it in. So that you can do at your own pace by just pausing the video. Okay, moving forward, I want to leave you with a fun activity you can do at home. Okay, so you can create a poster that illustrates and even offers solutions to either an internal or an external conflict. Okay, so think about your conflict that you thought of in the very beginning that you've experienced, whether it was internal or external, and you can make a poster. Just be creative. Think about what the conflict is, which of the 4 types of conflict it might fall under, and then you can illustrate that poster any way that you see fit. You could think about my example of the puppy, the wiener dog puppy, and my 3 dogs that I already have, and that struggle between myself, my husband, any kind of conflict like that. Something you've experienced at school maybe, or something you've experienced with your siblings, since we've all been on this stay-at-home order or quarantine, whatever you want to call it. The social distancing, maybe you've had some conflicts come up there. So think about it, be creative, and just make a poster. Just, it's something to do in your time, and it'll really help you understand the concept of conflicts. So I hope you enjoyed the video and all the fun examples. There's a million examples out there, and be on the lookout for your own examples as you're watching your TV shows or your movies or reading your books. So have a great afternoon, and I'll join you next time.